is Ross Marquand, Aaron from The Walking Dead, and you're listening to the 365Flicks podcast.
Geek Speak, the definitive 365 cut. These are the meaningless ramblings of a Scottish redone whore and a pissy ex-video store clerk. Their ongoing mission is to set right the movie wrongs. They're gonna need a bigger podcast.
Hello everybody, you are listening to episode 38 of the 365Flicks podcast, and we have a special one.
Yes, we do.
We were contacted by the nice people at Titan Comics and asked if we would like to do a cheeky interview with a bona fide, certified, genuine comic books audio plays writer.
Wow, that was impressive.
That was me practicing my Enzo.
So on this episode we are joined by Mr. Cavan Scott.
Yes, we are.
So Cavan is a writer for Titan Comics, as Kev said, at the moment.
Amongst others.
Amongst others, I know. So at the moment Cavan is writing for Doctor Who, the 9th Doctor, for Star Wars, Penguins of Madagascar, easy for me to say, Blake 7, Angry Birds, Pathfinder, Vikings, you could go on and on.
Judge Dredd. I've got 2 stars on either side, Judge Dredd.
And also, of course, Star Wars Adventures in Wild Space, which is awesome.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely unbelievable.
And as you will find out later, a little bit of a spoiler, it's canon. I'm just saying that because I was quite buzzing he said that.
Okay.
So will we just play the interview?
We're going to join the interview now. Interview's already in progress, so enjoy.
Yes.
We are joined by the one and only Cavan Scott. Cavan, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are both of you?
Excellent. Yeah, I'm very well, thanks. Very, very well.
Would you like to explain who Cavan is?
Well, I think
you're saying the one and only, but you know there might be some people out there.
Well, we'll get there.
Okay. This is very much our style, Cavan. We're pretty loosey-goosey with the whole thing.
That's fine. I like being loose, so to speak.
Well, yeah, sometimes.
So, Cavan has done a lot of work. Cavan, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners? I mean, you've got a hell of an impressive catalogue of work. So, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners? What have you all worked on?
Sure. Yeah. Probably most people knew me originally for working on Doctor Who audio for Big Finish Productions. I've been writing for them and producing for them for the last 16 years. When Big Finish started doing BBC audio, Doctor Who audio, before Doctor Who came back and was popular. So yeah, I've worked on many Doctor Who audio in my time, and then have moved into other areas as well. I co-write a series of children's books set in the Star Wars universe. I write the 9th Doctor Who comic for Titan. I've written Adventure Time. I've written Penguins of Madagascar. I've produced and written Blake 7. And I'm currently working on the Vikings miniseries from Titan as well. So that's a little bit of what I've been up to.
Excellent.
That is literally just the tip of the iceberg.
It certainly is. It certainly is. Yeah, we said before we started recording when we were having a look through your website, which is cavanscott.com, we had a look through there, Cavan, and oh my God, there's so many awesome things that you've worked on.
Well, yeah, basically, I'm still doing my to-do list that I had when I was 10. So if it's anything I was interested in or loving or obsessed with at 10, I still want to work in it. So it's pretty much in fact, my daughter starts off the day with pretty much the same things I do: Star Wars, Doctor Who, the Beano, yeah, all there. So it's just a way of keeping hold of my youth, I think.
Yeah. The Beano, I did want to touch on that. It says on your webpage that are you currently a member of the Dennis the Menace Fan Club?
Well, you know, I think the fact I think it was suspended, so I think the fact it's still if you were a member, you're always a member.
Yeah.
So I think that's fine. Yeah, because I write a couple of strips a week for the Beano, which is, just a pure joy, because it is what I read growing up. From one of the first things I ever think I picked up. And at the minute I write Minnie the Minx and Banana Man, awesome. Which those are mornings you want to pinch yourself when you're waking up. And that's my job today. This morning was mainly Banana Man. After we've talked, I'm going to get stuck straight into writing the Minnie the Minx. So that again, as I say, it's that thing of never really having grown up and being quite proud of it.
That is cool. I love Banana Man. I'm a huge Banana Man fan.
Were you a member of the fan club? Because I was.
Of the Dennis Menace Fan Club? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I sent away you had the little coupon in the bottom corner. And I sent that away. It was awesome. I got my little police badge, Dennis the Menace badge. It was great. I loved it.
The question is, were you also a member of the Desperate Dan Pie Eating Club? Because a lot of people were both.
I never read the Dandy.
Right, okay. You were just pure Beano, were you?
I was pure Beano. Pure Beano.
Excellent.
Well, as we know, I was always more of a dandy man.
Yeah, you said that a few episodes back.
But everybody loves the Beano.
Everybody does. So you're saying that you wake up and you pinch yourself a little bit when you realise that you're writing some Banana Man or Minnie the Minx. And one question that we like to do with our guests is we sort of like to do a first, last, and best.
Okay.
Sort of like, what was the first thing you kind of read? So what was kind of like the first comic book that you read, the last one that you've read, and sort of the best thing that you think you've read?
Okay. Well, the first comic I read was the Beano, and because growing up in the late 70s in England and Great Britain, you had all those comics like the Beano, the Dandy, Nutty, Whizzer and Chips, Whoopee, Beezer. They go on and on and on. We pretty much have the Beano now. But I used to beg, borrow, and steal every one I could get hold of. But the Beano was always there, so that was always really my entry drug. The last comic I read was Batman issue 51, which I read last night, which is the last of Scott Snyder's run with Greg doing the art, and it is phenomenal. And for a 5-year run of Batman to sort of have one issue that sums everything up, puts all the toys back in the box, pretty much how they were, but with a few changes along the way, and sort of leaves the door open. It's a bit of a masterwork. The greatest thing I've ever read. Oh, I mean, that's a tough one.
Yeah, it is putting you on the spot, which is why we ask it.
Thanks for that. I mean, obviously, there's stuff like Sandman. All the stuff that you expect that come. You know, are great works of art. With superhero comics, which I soon sort of graduated to. The two, there's two. Can I choose two? Is that allowed?
You can choose two.
You can hold.
Yeah. I might even push it to 3. There's, I think the one that really got me into reading superhero comics was Secret Wars, the original Secret Wars, and there was a UK reprint edition of Secret Wars, which was every week, split the story into every week. Alpha Flight in the back as the backup strip, and I remember picking up issue 1, and I'd never really read superhero comics before. I knew the characters all from cartoons more than anything else, I think. I knew all the Marvel characters from cartoons. And the fact that they all knew each other and were in the same adventure and were in a comic blew me away. I mean, now people are so used to crossovers. And, let's face it, you go to cinema and of course you know that Hulk knows Iron Man, who knows Spider-Man, who knows everyone else. But to see them all in that first issue all together and talking to each other and have a history, that was incredible. And that sort of led me into that world. And then I suppose the next one really is The Killing Joke, which sort of leveled up a bit. I got into reading from the Secret Wars. I got into reading John Byrne's run on Fantastic Four when She-Hulk was in the Fantastic Four, which sort of led me into exploring more of his stuff, getting into the Man of Steel when that relaunched, and Batman properly. And then I picked up The Killing Joke, and I realised what comics really could do. Yeah. And I'm so excited about seeing the animated film because it just looks so amazing.
And how do you feel about them throwing an R rating on it?
Do you know? It's not a nice story, The Killing Joke. The Joker does some pretty hideous things, and if you imagine, between the panels what he's been doing, it gets even worse. So I'm quite glad they're not sanitizing it, to be honest. Yeah. That was the hit when I was, a young teen picking it up and reading it for the first time. That's what hit me. This sort of just the pure, the depth of it and the fact that it is a dangerous world and Batman and his friends get hurt and it's not all jolly and pleasant and fun. And so, I think great. If you're going to do Killing Joke, I think you have to have it with an R rating.
I know they seem to make a big thing about when they announced that it was going to be an R rating, and much like you're saying right there, if they were going to do it, it had to be. So I don't know why it was a big thing, but they made a big deal of it.
Yeah, and when they did the animated version of The Dark Knight recently, you know, and again, it didn't pull too many punches, and I think if you're going to do those stories, you've got to do them as they're meant to be seen. You've
got a pretty big body of work, and we'll touch on them in a moment before we talk about what you're doing right now. One question I did want to ask is, if you had, I mean, it sounds like you're already doing your sort of dream job. If you had the choice of absolutely any comic book, any audio, or any, like, the things that you do, the choice of anything out there, what would it be?
You like these questions, don't you? We get straight in with them.
We try and make them as hard as possible.
Well, it is.
Some people like an icebreaker. We try a wall builder. So.
I can see that. If we're in the world of DC, it would have to be Superman.
Yeah. Because
Superman was my way into DC. And growing up watching the Superman films and sort of knowing the character from them and then discovering the world in all its different variants. And I've been loving what DC have been doing with Superman recently. I think the recent run of Action Comics with Greg Pak has just been phenomenal. With Marvel, because I'm going to split the question in two like that, it would be Thor. Because I do have a bit of a Viking thing going on and always have done. And I love Thor. I love the cross between the sort of superhero and the mythology. So, yeah, I'd love to have a play with those two characters.
Superman would be a good one.
Superman would be good. Did you see Batman vs Superman?
I have seen Batman vs Superman.
You're not going to go down this road, are you?
What did you make of Batman vs Superman?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a film that has things it needed to be tightened up on. I think it was 3 films trying to be one. I don't get all of... I can see why some people might not like the take. I can't see the reason for all of the hate.
Yes.
That was aimed at it. There are moments. It hasn't got a lot of humour in it. I'll give it that. Although Jeremy Irons is brilliant and as Alfred and made me laugh. I liked the 3 leads. I generally like the story, but I thought it could have been easily 2 films, 3 films, rather than cramming it all in together. And then that meant that the storyline had to be contracted down, and there had to be some coincidences put in. Like why you would have Zod's ship still in the middle of Metropolis and things like that, which, if it had more time to play with, and I don't mean a longer film, I mean more films, I think we would have got there. A lot of people have been saying about it, how can we be invested in these characters? We've only seen, that Superman in Man of Steel. Well, it's still Superman, it's still, we know who Superman is, and we know who Batman is, and so it's a different take. I don't know. I think a lot of times, because I've grown up being a Doctor Who fan and being a James Bond fan and all these things that we sort of just take for granted, that tones change and people change in roles and the franchises change over time, I'm a little bit more sympathetic when you have changes of tone in a sort of remake or a reboot. And I'm also of the opinion that if you don't like a reboot and a remake, well, you've still got your original film there on the shelf. It's not going to go away. It's not going to be burnt. I'm a big, huge Ghostbusters fan. One of my favourite things as a kid. Still haven't done anything on Ghostbusters, so IDW, I will be talking to you. But yeah, I mean, there's the new film coming out. I'll give it a go. If I don't like it, Ghostbusters is still there. If I do like it, well, I get sort of more sort of Ghostbusters. So that's the way I try and look at it anyway. I try not to get too angry.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
It is a very good point, because the movie has been so divisive, and people are putting a lot of hate on it, and I don't think it's warranted at all. I can, like you say, I can understand some of the peeves, but for me, there was a lot of hate, and it was all kind of before the movie even kind of took off.
I think that was it. That's what I think annoyed me more than anything. Yeah. The fact that people were making a decision before they saw the film, or would say, I'm not going to see this film, but this is why I hate it. And deciding before they sat in the movie theatre that they wouldn't recognise the characters. And as far as I could see, I could sort of recognise all 3 of them. Batman is driven. He's lost Robin. He's in a bad way. Well, we had that in the 80s. We saw that Batman. Yeah. And he could have gone that way very, very quickly. Superman, well, do you know what? He's still quite idealistic in that film. The world around him is going to hell. Yeah. And he's caught up in the middle of a world where people are scared of him. But that's pretty much what would happen if someone could suddenly come down and start flying through buildings and burning lasers. We would not all sit there and go, "Yay, Superman, you're brilliant!" We might all be a little bit scared of him. So, and I think, the Superman I saw in that film, yeah, he made some decisions that you might think, well, that's a bit odd, but he's still learning how to be Superman. I think that's what I take away from the films. It could be that I'm being completely rose-tinted on that, but I still very much recommend Wonder Woman, definitely. I mean, the grin she gives when she jumps into the fight made the movie to me.
Yeah, it sells the movie, doesn't it?
I think Wonder Woman was the big surprise of the movie. Yeah. I can't wait to see her standalone movie.
She was for me, definitely.
Yeah, and you've got Superman and Batman who really don't want to fight, really. And then you've got Wonder Woman who just loves it. Bring it on. So,
she does.
Yeah, it's a good dynamic, and hopefully, well, we will be seeing more, won't we? So, I'm looking forward to it.
Yep. Are you happy with that?
I'm happy with that.
Kev took a lot of umbrage to people bitching on Batman versus Superman.
Really? Okay.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I got pulled into quite a few wars on social media. As Chris, we did a full episode talking about what we thought of the movie about a week later, and Chris put out there that I was taking a lot of onus on the hate, I was kind of going against them, and he says, you seem to have taken this very, very personally, and I'm like, well, I do feel like I have.
Yeah,
and
I think what I find with social media, and I was at the point so many times when I was wading in and then had to either delete it or sit on my hands for a few hours. And it gets to that point where I wanted to go and see it, and I saw it probably a few weeks behind everyone else because we couldn't go and see it at the time. And I was worried about coming out and saying I liked it if I liked it, because you immediately get that, and it happens with things like Doctor Who, or whatever. If you say you like an episode that people don't like, you suddenly get everyone yelling it to you, and so it makes you think, well, can I just like something, And I think that's I love a lot of social media. I love what it does. I love the community it builds, but it also, it can be quite a sort of pack mentality as well if people don't like it. And if you're on the other side of that, it can feel quite threatening, I think.
Yeah, our episode became very much addressing the hate.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah,
purely because of that. Because we did feel like it was like you say, Cavan. It was we on that episode we raised the point of it. It became kind of like a witch hunt.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So we thought that it was our duty to address some of these issues, and we did, and we won. So,
well, there you go.
We are planning a crossover episode with another podcast. It's hopefully going to be doing that in the next couple of weeks. Literally, they slammed it. They really hated it, and we were fans of it. So we're planning on doing a crossover and sort of battling it out.
Please tell me you're going to do this like that scene in Anchorman when the two newsrooms go to war.
That would be awesome. That would be absolutely amazing.
Well, if you could film it, and it'll be phenomenal.
They're based in Chicago. That's the only thing.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
We can fly over. It'll be fine.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. I think for the purpose of that, I would.
And obviously, because you're podcasters, as long as there's no hits to the throat and to the larynx, you're all right. Anything else is good. Go for it. Yeah, golden.
Yeah,
but the voices remain true.
Oh, they have to. They have to.
Yeah.
So let's go back to you. So obviously, from your body of work, and Kev's going to go quiet here.
I'm not going to go quiet.
From your body of work, you're obviously a massive Doctor Who fan.
I am. And again, it was another thing about growing up where I grew up and when I grew up. Tom Baker was the Doctor when I was a kid. Tom Baker was God, a terrifying God. He scared me silly. Still does a bit. And when I was much younger, I find him far more terrifying than any of the monsters he was fighting. But growing up in that era, around the time, going into the 80s and into the sort of the Five Doctors time when Doctor Who was huge as it is now, perhaps not on a worldwide scale, but, I remember in school when every story in the class would finish with Time Lords arriving, because, that's what we were all obsessed with.
Yeah.
And then going through that period of time when people weren't so obsessed with it, except for the ones who were really obsessed with it. And it became a bit of a sort of outsider thing again. So, it's always been a part of who I am. And it was the way into working in fiction and time fiction, licensed fiction and whatever, because I started off as a magazine journalist, but mainly because when I was a kid, I wrote stories and fanzine articles about Doctor Who. So I sort of started that way and then made a job out of it. So it's always been part of who I am and what I do.
So one of the big things that you worked on was the Whoology for the 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
So we earlier on we mentioned that when we started to look through your body of work, Cavan, we thought, where do we start here? What do we talk about first? Because there's so much. So when you sat down and started to work on Whoology, where did you start? What was the process there?
Well, it was interesting because I worked on that with another writer, Mark Wright, who a lot of my early stuff I worked with. And I think we started by laughing hysterically when we realised what we've just set ourselves up to do. And for people who don't know Whoology, it was a sort of a miscellany kind of, book of lists and diagrams and bringing out all sort of those sort of, it's a bit of minutiae in the Doctor Who history. But as you said, there was 50 years of it. So we just literally sat and did what every Doctor Who fan does in a pub. We just started listing stuff, things we liked, things we didn't like, all those little in-jokes that you have about, monsters and companions and those kind of things. And it just all went from there. To the point, actually, I think we had far more potential material that we could have put into the book and got into far too much detail. And we had to sort of say, well, we'll largely just make it about the TV show. While we'll sort of touch on the books and the audios and the comics and everything else, we would have killed ourselves if we included all that. And also we would have killed every bookseller in the land who had to pick it up and hand it over to someone, because it would have been, like the Encyclopedia Britannica. But yeah, it started from that. And then we did the thing that sounds wonderful, and it was wonderful, but you do start realising you've got to do it in a certain amount of time. We started at Unearthly Child, and we waded through with a snowman, as it was then, a snowman. So we watched and we read and we listened and we gathered all the information and filled in charts and spreadsheets, and it wasn't sexy. Yeah, there was nothing about it that was attractive when we were working on it, and laughed a lot. And so and it turned into this book, which has done remarkably well. And I know a lot of people still have, it helped get me the job on the Doctor Who comics, because when I walked in and talked to Andrew, the editor, he has a copy on his shelf that he uses as a reference guide. So it's like, there we go. And it was brilliant. Then the funny thing was that we did Whoology. It was a massive success. It was brilliant. So BBC Books asked us to do a follow-up, which was the Wit and Wisdom and Timey-wimey stuff.
Yes,
which is like a quotation book of Doctor Who. So we didn't actually... it feels a bit of a cheat to say that we are the authors of this, but we're not. We curated great sayings from history. But it meant that we really wish they told us we were doing this while we were doing Whoology, because what we had to do was go back to Unearthly Child and start again. So it was like a case of Groundhog Year. But it is one of those things where you could go down so many rabbit holes, and we did. I mean, there's stuff that we didn't go through. One of the things we did in the book was we counted up to a certain point how many times the Daleks say exterminate or variations, and how many times a Dalek killed someone on screen. We had to work out if it was just on screen or whether we were going to do it off screen. And I remember having a chat to Mark, and then Mark said, we could do this with the Cybermen as well. And I'm like kicking him under the table going, shut up. No, we can't. But I think that's still down there if we ever do a follow-up. But it was really difficult to know where we started. And we pretty much started by doing the basics of, like, let's deal with the Doctors, and all the little facts like how tall all the Doctors are and when their birthdays are, because you sort of start with that and everything spins out. And there's a timeline at the front of the sort of the production of Doctor Who, and then going through. And that could have been a book in itself. That could have easily been... the timeline of Doctor Who's a book waiting to happen. To but, all those anniversaries and things, and bits and bobs. It was pretty much from there, and then everything else fell in place. But there was a lots of notebooks open with things scribbled down, and a spreadsheet that goes on for pages and pages and pages with ticks on it, with whether stories are in the past, present, and future, and what monsters they feature, and how the companion leaves, how many times they scream, and all. This was my life, and this is but the thing is, it's the life of every Doctor Who fan. It's what we all do. So we were being paid to just put our our obsessions down on paper for everyone else to read it and point and laugh at.
That's not a bad job.
I would be happy with that job. I definitely would. Now, a massive feather in your cap with regards to Whoology is that it was the first ever Doctor Who book to be a number one Sunday Times bestseller.
Well, it was number one. I wish it was. It was about it scraped to number 10, I think, or something. But it was the first. It was the first bestseller. Yeah. I mean, again, it sort of showed how important that year, I mean, it was the 50th anniversary.
It was a huge year, yeah.
Yeah, Paul. I think BBC Books had a book out every month that year. Of various different sizes and types, and I think it took everyone a bit by surprise. I think now it's been followed up by George Mann's Engines of War, the War Doctors, the novel. That became the first Doctor Who novel to become a Sunday Times bestseller. But yeah, no, it was a crazy year, and I think it sort of tapped into Whoology tapped into that thing in all Doctor Who fans, that we love these kind of facts figures, but also we tried to have a bit of fun with it. It wasn't too po-faced. You can't be po-faced about Doctor Who. People try and everything, but you can't, because part of the fun of being a Doctor Who fan is poking fun at it a bit and taking things that perhaps should be taken seriously, not so seriously, because that's the only way you can cope with them.
Yeah.
And so I think that was part of its success as well, that it was done with a very affectionate wink, and tongue firmly sort of embedded in cheek, while also making sure that we got as much as we could right along the way.
So you're currently working on Doctor Who, the Ninth Doctor, through Titan Comics.
Yes.
So how did you come about doing this story? Did you go to Titan with the idea of doing a story involving the Ninth Doctor? I
was working with Titan on Adventure Time, the UK comic of Adventure Time. I'd written a couple of strips for them on that, and knew that they were getting the license. I sort of heard it on the grapevine that it might be going to them when IDW lost the license and it moved over. Then as soon as they got it, I started nagging people until they'd let me talk to the right person. And I think at first they probably went, "Oh yes, that's fine," and then they thought, "He's not going to shut up, is he?" And so got to talk to Andrew and had a chat with him. And Andrew very nicely said to me, "Which Doctor would you like to write for if you had a choice?" And partly because I knew the 10th anniversary of Christopher Eccleston's Doctor was coming up, and I still can't get over that it's 10 years.
I know.
For the Ninth Doctor. That's quite scary. Partly because I knew that I'd worked on a Ninth Doctor audio again with Mark, and we knew how many people were looking forward to it, because there hadn't been very much Ninth Doctor for obvious reasons. Most of the merchandising kicked in after Chris left. Most of the big push for Doctor Who happened when David Tennant took over. So there weren't so many stories with the Ninth Doctor. So I knew there would be a pull. And also because I love that team of the Ninth Doctor, Jack and Rose, who we only saw in a few episodes. There's a very definite gap in that season. One of the only gaps in that season, where the stories don't just run one into another. And they leave at the end of one episode having only just met, and the next episode they're a proper unit and they're working together, and so it was obviously they'd had a lot of time together. So I knew there'd be good stories to tell. So it was a combination of those that I sort of said, "Yeah, go on, I'll do the Ninth Doctor then if I could." And he came back, and it was the right time, right person to be talking to. He said, "Well, that's one of the people we're looking at. Do you want to put a story together?" So it sort of went through there. So it was just, good luck to actually be sitting talking at the right person at the right time. And also, a little part of me going, well, I think that's the one people will want to know more about. I knew there was going to be 12th Doctor comics. I knew there was going to be 10th and 11th. And so it just seemed the obvious choice, really.
Yeah, that's the thing about Eccleston's Doctor, is because he left after one season, or series even, there is a lot more to tell. There are so many stories that you could tell with the Ninth Doctor. So if you could do any arc with the Ninth Doctor, hopefully the Ninth Doctor comic book will go on and on and on. If you could do any arc with the Ninth Doctor, what would you do?
Well, I can't tell you that, can I? Because I'm hoping the comic book's going to go on and on and on. And I've got certain things that... Well, one of the things I said right from the beginning is that I want to do the Ninth Doctor meeting the Cybermen, because he never did on the show, other than seeing a helmet in a glass cabinet. So I had that one in my back pocket, trying to work out how we do that with Rose, because Rose can't meet them first. And so was working all this, and then I got asked to write the summer event this year, co-write the summer event, which is Supremacy of the Cybermen, which still has the Ninth Doctor up against Cybermen. So it's all happening anyway. But there's other things I'd like to do, but I'm not going to tell you what they are because I want them to have. I want the Ninth Doctor to meet some old faces from Doctor Who. One thing we are doing with this series, we are, the first, for a very good reason, Russell T Davies kept continuity and Doctor Who out of the new series of Doctor Who, if you know what I mean. There wasn't many. We didn't hear the word Gallifrey until well into the 10th Doctor's era. It sort of dripped in with the comic. Most people who pick it up are Doctor Who fans. They pretty much know some of the history of Doctor Who, so we can be a little bit more fluid with that, and we can reference more in the past. So there will be faces from the Doctor's history popping up to meet the Ninth Doctor.
Yeah.
And there's certain characters from the past that you just pretty much want to see him with, because there's going to be fireworks. Again, I'm not going to say who those are. But they will be happening sooner rather than later in the run. There's going to be things I'm going to have to think about. We haven't got the Daleks at the minute, but if we do have the Daleks, I've got to try and work out how I could tell a Ninth Doctor Dalek story, if we could. Because obviously that would mess up the continuity again a bit. But there's always ways. There's always ways to twist it.
I was just thinking that you're saying about trying to figure out continuity and all that. I mean, I'm not as big a fan of Doctor Who as Chris is, and I would actually say Christopher Eccleston's series is probably the only one I've seen all the way through.
Yeah,
I've caught bits and pieces of other series and that. But with Doctor Who, is the whole continuity? Is that not one of the things you can do? You can just blame it on timey-wimey stuff?
Oh, yeah, you can. I mean, the Time War is brilliant. Just go, Time War. Yeah, I mean, Doctor Who itself didn't worry about continuity very much. I mean, the Dalek history, you look at the Dalek episodes, and Terry Nation was making up one episode to the next and one story to the next and just blatantly rewriting his own history. And so you can do, but at the same time, you've got to sort of put in an explanation of why times changed, because people get very angry very quickly if you start playing with established facts. But there's nothing, don't get continuity get in the way of a good story. So there's always a way. If I get the chance to write the Doctor and the Ninth Doctor and the Daleks, I will find a way, So, because let's face it, some of the best episodes were the Ninth Doctor and the Daleks. So in that series, obviously we want to see more of them. And I'd quite like to see the Ninth Doctor with older Daleks as well. Not the Time War Daleks.
Well, when the Ninth Doctor met the Dalek in that episode, it was broken and it was half dead and all that. But that is one of my favourite episodes. That's one of my favourite Eccleston episodes. Yeah,
I think that's a real turning point in the series for his character as well. That's the point where he is broken and he starts repairing after that. And then you get the stories with Jack and you get the team, and that's when suddenly I've always said the Ninth Doctor is a incarnation who's remembering how to be the Doctor.
Yeah.
And now even more so, now that Stephen's shoved in the War Doctor in between that we didn't know about, a Time Lord who said, an incarnation who says, I'm not the Doctor. It actually makes even more sense in a way, because he's literally remembering how to be the Doctor. He hasn't called himself the Doctor for we don't know how many hundreds of years. And suddenly he's running around doing all his old type of adventures with holding someone's hand and being a friend and having companions and having arguments in the TARDIS and all the things that he probably hasn't done for many, many, many decades. So, that's always how I've approached him.
So, with regards to the big summer event that you're doing at the moment, so it's to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Cybermen.
Of the Cybermen, yes.
And this is going to be a huge story because you've got the 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th Doctor in there.
Yes.
So, wow. I mean, are there any kind of plot points that you can tease for us on this?
Well, I can say that, because obviously a lot of people are saying, well, last year we had Paul Cornell's wonderful, and Neil Edwards, the 4 Doctors, when you had 3 Doctors and a couple of other Doctors meeting up. And people are saying, oh, no, so is this going to happen every year? We're going to have the Doctors getting together having a tea party. In Supremacy, they don't actually meet, but they work together. So we've decided we're going to go for a completely different type of story, because multi-Doctor stories are amazing. We all love them because they're events. And let's face it, in the original series, they were definitely events, because up to, 20 years in, that it only happened twice, and it'd be very easy to have them always popping up in each other's timelines, but it means it lessens the impact, So we've made the decision that we are going to keep them separated away from each other, but they're very much going to be working together at the same time as the story progresses. So we've got 4 different time zones, 4 Doctors, more than 4 different types of Cyberman, Rassilon, Time Lords again. We can write Time Lords again because they're back, and it leads on very much from that last last Doctor Who episode, where you see Rassilon being kicked off of Gallifrey by the Doctor, get off my planet, to get off my world. So we basically tell you what happened next to Rassilon, which is he meets the Cybermen, and it all goes very wrong from there. I'm not going to say who it goes wrong for. But yeah, so yeah, it's very exciting. I'm working with George Mann. We're co-writing it together. George is a really old friend of mine as well, so it's great to be working together. And yeah, it's all very exciting. I haven't seen any art yet, but hopefully that should start coming through in the next couple of days. And yeah, but it's one of those dreadful things when I can't really tell you anything at all.
We're not doing very well today, are we? We're not getting any spoilers.
No.
I mean, it's got all the current companion teams pretty much from the comics. So for the 9th, obviously my era, as it were. We've got Rose and Jack. So after I'm saying I've got to work out how Rose can meet the Cybermen without meeting the Cybermen, I had to actually do that. And then we've got Cindy and Gabby for the 10th, and working our way through to the companions. And the 12th Doctor gets various companions along the way too.
Yeah,
I probably said too much now. There's probably a sniper sitting across the road from Titan going, "Shut up."
Well, what you could do is you could find out and then just email us later and say, "Take that little bit out."
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So when the Doctor meets the beep, that's going to be a really cool bit.
So on the issue of what you're doing right now with the 9th Doctor, I was kindly sent a review copy of the first episode. I've had a read of it. It's some good reading. Can you give us a little brief sort of what the arc is?
Yeah, sure. So the Doctor is off doing some doctory things along the way, and he suddenly gets a message. We did a mini-series, as we know, last year.
Yeah.
There's, playing a bit of lip service to that. The beginning of the story, you haven't had to read the mini-series, but if you haven't, he's setting up some beacons around the universe to basically tell him if anyone's using any weapons from the Time War, which was the plot of the first mini-series. So that's pretty much all you need to know. That's as much bearing as it plays on the plot, to be honest. He's setting up these beacons. And the beacons pick up a message from Captain Jack, but it's a message from Captain Jack from when Captain Jack was younger. Because one of the things that happened in the first series of 21st Century Doctor Who, there was this plot line that Captain Jack had lost his memory and it had been wiped, and it was never ever touched on again, ever. They never mentioned it. There's 3 years of the Captain's life, I think, that he has no idea what he did. The Doctor picks up a broadcast from Jack in that time and recognises the planet, zooms off in the TARDIS, or warps off in the TARDIS to find out where it is. Opens the door of the TARDIS to find he's stepped onto a world where he's the biggest celebrity ever. He has a Cardassian type docudrama going on with the Doctor in it, and his Doctor as well, his incarnation. He's got a companion called Penny, which Rose is most put out by, who's a very tall, leggy redhead. He has a hit single out. He's written his own autobiography. He's going to meet his fans, and obviously the Doctor is quite upset by this fact. And then he bumps into an old enemy who he thinks isn't an old enemy, because everything's a bit wrong, so there's obviously something going on, and that's where the story kicks off. So there's lots of little touches to the past in it, but hopefully done in a way that if you don't know the references, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you know the references, brilliant. It's not intrinsic to the plot, but yeah, the basic plot is the Doctor turns up on a planet when he's the most famous person there, and everyone loves him. Everything moves on from that point.
That sounds good. Kev has sent me the link, but I'm going to check that out.
If you're an old Doctor Who fan, I mean, in the sense of a Doctor Who fan of what people call the classic era now, and I just call it's still Doctor Who. There's a returning monster from the Hartnell years, but again, you don't have to know that, but it just pops up again to play with that expectation of what people might expect to see from a 9th Doctor story.
You really sound like you're absolutely loving your job right now.
It's amazing. There were so many points in that issue where I was going, can I do this? Can I really do that? Oh, go on, I am, and no one stopped me. And so far, everyone seems to have loved it. And we get to, over the next couple of issues, we get to play with a returning monster from the new series who we get to do something different with. And it's playing with the toys you love, and having people give you that opportunity and seem to trust you with it. I mean, it's the best feeling in the world. And at the end of the day, I get to say, this morning I got up and wrote and read some Banana Man today. Tomorrow I get to play with Doctor Who again. What's not to love about that job?
It does sound fantastic.
It certainly does. It certainly does. Yeah. So the Ninth Doctor is out now.
It is.
So everybody check that out. Titan Comics, Doctor Who, the Ninth Doctor. We're going to be checking that out. We're going to be giving that a read. We'll do a review of it on a upcoming episode.
Cool, and I want to give a shout out to Adriana Mello, who does the art as well, who's come on board, and she's just got an amazing, brilliant style, which is it's not photorealistic in the fact that it doesn't look like any of the characters been traced, but you recognise the characters, but they're very fluid and very comic book as well. And yeah, she's been brilliant. And Matt is doing the colouring. I mean, they're a brilliant team. And she is she's laughed at me for saying this, but she's a bundle of enthusiasm and glee. Everything I say, I get back so many smiley faces and clapping hands, and just like it's one of those weird situations that Adriana lives in Brazil. I live in Bristol in England. We haven't met, but I feel like we work in it with her every day. And it's just so much fun because she's getting it and she loves it. And and I think it's coming across in the art, and it's great to see so many people picking up on it as well. So I was a fan of her work for Miss Marvel years ago on Marvel, and so it's been brilliant to work with her.
It does look great.
That was actually like one of the questions I had. You've pretty much just answered that. Was sort of obviously you can't always be in the same space as your artist, and I kind of wondered because we're not that knowledgeable about the industry. I just sort of wondered how that kind of worked.
Well, it's funny because I sort of have had it hardwired into me because as I said, Marco I used to write more with, and we wrote Whoology and Doctor Who stuff together. I don't think we ever wrote anything in the same city. We started off when we got commissioned to write our first Big Finish. We were both living in Bristol and Bath, and then Mark got a job in London, and then Mark got a job in Halifax, and so it's just basically moved further away from me to get away from me. I think so. All of our time working together was through email, and then Skype came along, and Skype makes things a lot differently, and so yeah, I've got used to that kind of remote working type thing, and so it doesn't seem that strange in a way. The strange things when you work with some artists who work in different continents is that time zones don't always link up. So you're just finishing for the day, and your artist pops up and goes, "Hello," and you go, "Oh, hello, yes, I've got to work again now." And vice versa. They're probably just about to crash, and they've got me going, "Good morning." But yeah, technology is literally a wonderful thing, and it makes things out so easily because we're always chatting to each other on whether it's WhatsApp or Twitter or email or Skype or whatever. So it doesn't feel like we're that far away. With the miniseries, the Ninth Doctor miniseries, Blair Shedd, who worked on it with me on that miniseries, we only met at San Diego Comic-Con after pretty much we were done, and we were doing signings. And sitting down doing a signing for the comic that we just produced was the first time we'd met. Literally. Wow. So that was very odd that's your first, someone who you've had so many discussions with, and you pretty much know how they're going to react to stuff and whatever, it's just suddenly they're sitting beside you, and it's just a completely different thing. So yeah, it's pretty much the norm now that you hardly ever meet the people you're working with. But it's wonderful when you do work near someone. Yeah, it's made a lot easier. The world's got a lot smaller because of technology, so it makes life a lot easier. It
has. I recorded an episode, a podcast last night with some guys from New York, and one of them was in Canada. And it's you're right enough. It is amazing. It certainly is. One more question about Doctor Who. Who is your Doctor?
Tom Baker.
Tom Baker.
I mean, he's your Doctor's who you first watched, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I said, there was no other. I didn't know another Doctor. Because I was doing a school visit the other day, talking to some school kids about comic writing and things, and the look on their face when I said that if you missed an episode of Doctor Who, you missed it, and it was never shown again, and there wasn't iPlayer, and there wasn't Netflix or DVDs. I remember saying this to my daughter: we didn't have DVDs, love. We didn't have videos, and she just looked at me and went, "Did you have toilets?" I was like, "Yes, we had toilets. Yes, we definitely had toilets." And yeah, I mean that fact that all I knew was Doctor Who, was Tom Baker, and a few blurry pictures of John Pertwee that every now and then would appear in the Radio Times. But having never watched it, and then of course I discovered the Target novelisations, largely by Terence Dicks, with all these old stories that I'd never heard of, And so for me, a lot of the time growing up, Doctor Who on telly was Tom Baker, and then the first, second, and third Doctor were in books. You know, it was a long time before I saw them. Probably, to be honest, the Five Doctors was the first time I saw old Doctors. And I got Mark and I got to write for Tom. We actually wrote it a couple of years ago. It's coming out next year. A Big Finish audio with Tom Baker, Lalla Ward, and K9. And K9 because I just make him a real person, and John Leeson as K9. You know, I pretty much think of John that way. And that was amazing because that's like suddenly, you know, no matter who I've worked with in Doctor Who, and I've worked with some wonderful doctors, but suddenly I was writing words for my Doctor. Yeah. And that changed everything.
That must be very, very cool.
It is. And also terrifying. Because there's suddenly a responsibility. And also, of all the Doctors, he is one of the most difficult to write for because he's so idiosyncratic in the way he speaks and the way he does. And you know, actually, to be honest, he's going to make it his own dialogue anyway. Yeah. But it was a moment when you sit down and go, oh, this is it. It was a job we actually didn't have time to do, but they said, do you want to do it? And we went, oh, go on then, because how could you say no? No, I don't want to write the Fourth Doctor. No, don't be silly. No, we moved heaven and earth to make that one happen.
I can imagine. So would you ever write a multi-Doctor story with bringing Tom Baker in with Eccleston and Tennant?
Oh, that'd be amazing. Maybe
that would
one
be
day.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of the next in it. You want to see the modern Doctors, 21st century Doctors combined, but yeah, it'd be good to see them all together. And I mean, God, your fantasy 12 Doctors film that we'd all probably love to see, which obviously for various reasons can't happen. Yeah. To see all 12 of them. And you do that, again, suddenly you become a Doctor Who fan and you go, oh, who would get on with who? You know, I can see the 11th Doctor and the 3rd Doctor, Matt Smith and John Pertwee, really going at each other because they're both as rude as each other. You know, if you think about everyone thinks about the 11th Doctor being this lovely, jolly chap, but he's incredibly rude to people at times as well. Just as lovely, charming 3rd Doctor could be incredibly rude to people. So put those two in a room and there'll be fireworks. And then, and the 10th Doctor and the 7th Doctor trying to out mysterious each other. And, you know, and to be all sort of doom-laden and I'm the champion in time, I am the last Time Lord. You know, it's like you can see them just looking sad at each other in rainstorms and stuff. Yeah, it'll be great to see. Yeah.
That sounds great.
That does sound great, yeah.
One day.
So that's the Ninth Doctor, which, as we said, it's now out. You can get it in your comic book stores. You can get it on the digitals and that. One of the things, like, it sounds like you have a lot of free reign with that story. It sounds like they've just said, just have at it. I want to speak about Vikings.
Yes.
Because obviously it's a companion to a TV show that exists. It's a companion to the 3rd series.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, how does that work? As in, you go from one comic where you've got a lot of free reign. Do you need to hit certain notes or hit certain marks when you're doing Vikings? Or
so with Vikings, I was asked to come on board because, as I said earlier on, I'm a bit of a Viking geek and have been. In York, in north of England, there's a place called the Jorvik Centre, which is like a reproduction village, a Viking village, which sadly at the minute is being renovated because it was hit by the floods earlier in the year. But I went there as a kid on holiday and absolutely fell in love with it because it was about Viking life. And we all knew the Vikings from the stories with the axes and the horned helmets they didn't have and all that business. And we knew about the pillaging and other words that perhaps a young child shouldn't know, but does know because of Vikings. But going to Jorvik and seeing a village and seeing what they were really like was amazing. And I fell in love with them then. So I'd always had this going in the back of my mind. And then when the show came along, for that reason that it's all about them as people, I loved. So Titan, I probably had many a conversation in pubs about Viking geekery over the time. So when they came up, they, you know, thankfully came to me and said, would you like to? And I jumped at it. But we wanted it right from it had to tie in, it had to feel like it was part of that particular time. Yeah. Because when we were writing it as well, the current half season that's shown, you know, that was still very much under wraps and, you know, they were keeping everything quite secret. So it was the last sort of shown season out there, the last season. So yeah, we had to make it feel like it was part of it. And so you do sit there and go, well, how are you going to do this? How are we going to bring it out? And, you know, and you have to sort of have a little bit of poetic license of they could go off and have another little mini adventure between adventures. But we wanted it to be as authentic as we could. And the thing about Vikings as well is it has a huge cast. Yes. And we knew right from the off, I knew that I was going to upset someone that their character wasn't the main character, in it. So we pretty much knew Ragnar would have to be one of the main characters. But then it was a case of, like, which one do we push? We've tried to get at least lip service. Everyone's in there. Some have more of an effect on the story than others. But yeah, so we kept it really true to that as well, because it's History Channel involved with MGM. It's one of the only jobs I've had when I've been asked to provide historical evidence for my story. So I put together my story, and they came back to me and said, "Brilliant, where's the proof that this kind of thing happened?" kind of thing, So, and when you say proof in the Dark Ages, it's a bit murky anyway, but, it has to be theories. So I had to go away, and I said I'm a bit of a Viking geek, so I had textbooks and books there, and I had to get them out, do a bit of research, point out that, yes, these things sort of happened. We think this happened because of this, bringing out, primary. It was like going back to doing a history course, it was like bringing out primary notes. And that's very much part of what they do. Michael, the showrunner, Michael Hurst, has a historical advisor who works with him all the time. So that was that was a strange thing to sort of start work on a comic book and have to basically show my workings and show my homework. But hopefully that will come across, we're trying to make it as authentic as we can.
Well, I've read the first issue, and it's phenomenal. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this.
Brilliant, thank you.
I mean, I'm a big fan of the show anyway. I'm not fully caught up yet, but I'm a fan of the show. But that was my main thing, was like just kind of how you choose where to jump in.
Yeah, we've chosen a point at the beginning of Series 3 where Ragnar's band are over in Wessex, and they're trying to set up a settlement, which obviously, we know from historical evidence that there were Viking settlements. We know that they did deals, and they were traders. So it seemed a good point. And then during that entire season, you've got Floki, who is one of the best characters ever,
Great
a religious fundamentalist pagan, with amazing hands that do strange things when you're not looking at them at the back of the screen. And he hates the fact that they're dealing with Christians, and you've got all that conflict of the old religion and the new religion. The new religion being Christ, the Christians, the old religion being the pagan gods, and how the Vikings themselves dealt with that. And we know through history what happened when the Vikings converted. We know that was pretty much the beginning of the end of the Viking Age. So it's been brilliant to see all that going in the show and really have them exploring pagan religion. And so the story sort of went from there, really. We knew we wanted it to be around that era. We knew it wanted to be about that conflict of identity with the Vikings. And so from my point of view, I went, well, this is a chance then. We've seen Vikings up against some other Vikings, but we've never really seen an all-out battle between two tribes properly. So that's pretty much the way we're going with this. And the story sort of came through there, really. Then it would be about the Christians asking the Vikings for help to kill more Vikings, and what that would mean to the people who are actually picking up the axes, picking up the swords. And Ragnar's an amazing character, because here you've got a man who wanted to be an explorer, has found himself a king, and is now having to be a diplomat. And if anyone's been watching the latest series, he's not coping with that pressure very well. And so we wanted to without touching on that, because that's obviously in the future for Ragnar than we're dealing with, foreshadow some of that, because obviously these kind of conversations and debates and battles are what's going to lead to whatever happens to him next on the TV show. So yeah, we wanted to get involved in that. But it is a tough point to go work out, because we're always going to disappoint someone. We're always going to have someone saying, well, no, you should have done this. Why didn't you do that gap there? Because there's a gap between series 3 and 4. But obviously that gap, Ragnar's very ill in that gap. So, that's a difficulty you've got. We could put a story there, but Ragnar will be on his deathbed for the entire 4 issues, which wouldn't be right for the first miniseries.
No.
And I hope there will be more miniseries, and perhaps those will be the chance we have to explore some of the other characters in more depth. But I think to do this, we had to focus on Ragnar and his relationships, because that's the tentpole for the show.
So by that, can we assume that you're at least hoping? Obviously, you won't know, but are you at least hoping that this isn't like a one miniseries and done? I'd
really hope so. And from issue 2, in sort of the back matter at the back of the issue, I interview Michael Hurst, who's the showrunner.
All right.
So we have that running through issues 2, 3, and 4. We couldn't do it for issue 1 because Michael was busy making a TV show, so he was a bit busy. So we have a chat, and just in that conversation, the amount of ideas that could come out of it, of ways to take it. Because obviously doing a comic based on a show like Vikings, it means that you can perhaps explore some of the elements that you've seen on screen, but they haven't been able to bring too much time to because there's a bigger story to tell. So my hope is that, we'll get to do more and that we'll get to explore some of the elements that we've sort of seen and we've gone, oh, that could be interesting. Yeah, and so, there's a notebook with scribbles in it that one day I'm hopefully like to expand into stories. We'll see. If everyone goes out and buys the miniseries, please go and buy the miniseries now. I will plead with you and threaten you with an axe just to keep the brand going, but... Yeah.
Well, we're gonna be pimping it on the episodes because
good news.
Like I say, I'm enjoying the show, and when I got sent the issue, I did kind of sit there and I was kind of like, a companion comic to the Vikings. I was like, I don't know, but then when I sat and read it, I was obviously it's only a first issue, so you don't get a massive great deal out of it.
No.
But straight away, I'm like, I could definitely buy into this and keep reading this. So I'll be pimping it and I'll be putting it on the website and everything. And
the interesting thing as well, your first issues are really difficult.
Yeah. Because
you have got to try. And I know, I'm fully aware as well, there'll be a lot of people picking up who've never seen the show because it's got, word Viking on the front, and it's got a picture of a Viking on the front. And so I'm not sure what they'll be expecting. And I think that's the thing when people watch Vikings, the show for the first time. I think I've had a load of people who've watched the first episode and go, well, that wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And I go, we'll stick with it because they go, well, where are the big battles? Where are the big fights? I go, well, they come, trust me, but you've got to build this world first. And so we've tried to do that a bit with issue 1. So issue 1 could have just been 20 pages of battle, but actually that won't sustain the story. So there's a little bit of violence in there. There is more violence to come, trust me. By the time you get to issue 3, I was talking to Stars, the artist, earlier on. I was like, you wait till they get to the end of issue 3. That's when we get really visceral. But, it is a show that deals with the relationships between the characters. And I was very pleased they gave me a chance to deal with what's going on at home when Ragnar's away, with back at the village in Catacult, when you've got Ragnar's wife who's having to go in his place. And all those kind of elements as well. So there's a lot going on. So issue 1 was a bit of a task to introduce all the characters and the various things that are going to be happening.
And again, you've just touched on your artist there again. Once I'd put the book down, once I'd finished reading it, I was kind of like, put the book down. Sorry, I'm a digital age. Once I'd finished reading it, the art is great. So I went and had a look for Stars, and I mean, again, that's another high caliber artist you've got there.
I know, it's amazing, and. We were chatting earlier on, and again, it's like you asked about never meeting. Today was the first time that I've actually talked to Saz on the phone. It's always been by email, and then we weren't talking about work. We were talking about Conan because we both love Conan, and so he just phoned me up so we could have a chat about it. And it's just that thing when you suddenly realise that you haven't actually spoken to this person. But I mean, again, the work he's doing and the work he's doing for Dark Horse as well at the minute is amazing.
Yeah.
And it's and the stuff that we've got coming up. I mean, it just gets better and better.
Like I said, the art in the first issue made me go and look for him because it's a beautiful book. Like, it's really nice to look at. So
and again, it's the thing that you can recognise the characters, but they're not slavishly just photo reference, because you can't have life when it's like that. So he Floki again, a character I just keep coming back to because he's so amazing.
He is a great character.
Floki's glares in the issue, Floki glaring at people. I mean, he's got Floki's glared off to a T. It's just it's. But it's difficult because you watch that show. Ragnar must be the most difficult person to capture because the performance from Travis is amazing because it's so subtle and there's so many emotions rippling over that face at all times. So that's quite a challenge, I would think, to capture.
There was a few times where you're saying like people are coming into it and it's not exactly what they were expecting. His performance keeps you. Like for me, it kept me like I can watch a slow burn TV show like for the next 2 years. I can. But it was like his performance does grab you, and he's phenomenal. He's a great actor.
He dominates it, even when he's not really in the episodes. He absolutely dominates it. It is amazing, and it is that thing. I love the character because he's not out worry. He's a man who's found himself in a situation, and I think we've seen in the latest season as well. we're seeing what being a king is doing to him. You know, and he's built a dynasty, and what actually the fact that he's built that dynasty and sacrificed so much of what he actually started out with. So yeah, it's a great show, and it's a real privilege to work on it, to be honest.
So do you think this is going to be a new trend then? Companion shows or companion comics to TV shows?
Well, I think so, but haven't they always been there? I mean, you know, there's always been time. I mean, we talked about Doctor Who. I mean, it's the longest running comic based on a TV show if you look at all its various different forms. I think we're starting to see more as people get into that sort of the box set mentality of watching things, and you know, it's having that extra little box set, you know, on the side, and it's like a little extra from the DVD kind of thing, you know, another little adventure. I think people are taking comics based on TV and film more serious now as well. You're seeing it by some of the names you're getting on it from sort of the main players in the States as well, doing what in the past was always considered to be something that was, and those things happen as well. You know, and there's always been, I mean, Star Trek comics have been a great example of actually have something that the fandom has really taken on, you know, heart to and love. But there's, you know, in the past, tying comics for films and TV shows were either adaptations or sort of little bits of fluff that you have along the way. But I think the fact that the TV shows themselves take them seriously, you know, so working on Vikings means that Michael, who's the showrunner, looks over the plot. So, you know, it's very much involved in what he's doing, you know, and the same with Doctor Who, the same with a lot of the things I work with. The people who are responsible for the televisual or film stories have an interest in the fiction or the comics or the tie-in books, whatever, to try and keep it all together and keep the whole, you know, keep it feel like the same universe. So you can move from one medium to the next and feel like you're in the same world.
That's the good thing about writing for Doctor Who compared to writing for a show like Vikings, whereas Doctor Who, you can, because it's all timey-wimey, you can just, you know, as long as it doesn't, like as you said before, mess up the continuity and, you know, all that kind of thing. But with Vikings, it's actually lending something towards the story that the TV show is telling, isn't it? Yeah,
I mean, that's definitely the aim. And that's one of the reasons, again, we decided to take a step back in the timeline of the TV show, because it gave us that chance to look back at a period of time. So when people are watching the show now, they can sort of see where the characters have come from, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So it's like a reminder of a year ago, these characters were in a very different place. Or the events you're seeing now come from their mindset at the time. So Doctor Who's different because it's the old cliche, the Doctor can go anywhere and do anything and be any genre and all that kind of thing. So you can go off and do something that's completely different, but still, as long as it's got the Doctor and the TARDIS in it, you're pretty much, you don't even need the TARDIS, to be honest. You need the Doctor. In fact, sometimes you don't need the Doctor. So basically, I don't know what I'm saying. As long as there is some link to the Doctor somewhere, it can be a Doctor Who story.
As long as there's pictures.
Yeah. As long as as long as there's a BBC logo somewhere. I don't know. There's something about that makes it Doctor Who. But with something like Vikings, it needs to be very entrenched, I think.
Yeah.
To make it work. And I'd love to see them. I mean, I'd love to see more shows embracing this, and I think they are. I mean, you look through previews at the minute, and there's so many properties based on TV shows and films. Recently reading Legendary with their sort of Tales from the Drift for the Pacific Rim universe. You know, you had the Pacific Rim film, which is at the end of the story in a way. You know, and so Legendary Comics are doing these little mini-series. The first one was very much what happened to the characters you know, and it's sort of their origin stories. The second series, the one I think is just coming out soon, the final issue, is a pair of pilots we've never seen before, and we never will again, maybe. You know, it's just, and a Jaeger that we've not seen before, because they've got that vast history now that they can plug into.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is, and so I'm loving the fact that, especially I think with films as well, you're able to build we're used to comics around things like Star Wars, but there's all these other properties. Perhaps there's only one film, but there's so much more you can do with it.
So have you got your eye on another project coming up then?
Always got my eye on it. Well, I have to go back to my tick list, and you know, other than writing for DC or Marvel superheroes, I'm going to have to do something Star Trek at some point, just because Star Trek was too important to me growing up. My Star Trek was probably the films more than anything when they first, the TV show, I sort of remember being around the original series, but Wrath of Khan Search for Spock. That's my track. I'm used to my Kirk being slightly older. I get quite shocked when he's young in the original series. And from there, obviously, fell in love with things like the Next Gen. So, yeah, I'd love to do something Star Trek-y at some point. Ghostbusters, I'd love to, but to be honest, I'm loving what they're doing with Ghostbusters at the minute, so I'm quite enjoying it. The difficulty is that if you do everything that you love, that means you've got nothing to enjoy just from a pure fan base. And again, with the IDW, I joked about the IDW Ghostbusters comics earlier on, but actually I'm loving what they're doing because I don't know what's happening next and I'm not involved in it. And it still feels very much like Ghostbusters to me. And so it's good to be a fan of something. So there's probably some stuff I'd like to just keep at arm's length. But then again, if they came to me tomorrow and said, "Do you want to write Ghostbusters?" I'd obviously say yes. It's very easy to sit and say this when you're not working on it. But
so obviously you lend your hand to a lot of different things, like your comic books, your activity books, your award-winning audio plays that you've done, your short stories. Is there maybe a movie screenplay in you?
I'd hope so, but also I don't want to be a complete jack of all trades, master of none. I do spread myself quite thin, writing audio, prose, and comic books, and. Yeah, and I think obviously from writing scripts for both comics and audio, which are very similar in a lot of ways. Yeah, obviously I'd love to write something for a visual media, but at the minute I'm trying to concentrate on comics more than anything else because that was my first love. And that's not to say I don't love writing prose. I do, and I love writing audio. But comics were that first got me into reading. Comics are the thing that I always come back to, even through periods of time when I don't read that many comics. They will always drag me back in again, and there will always be something that will make me pick one up. So that's why I think you said earlier on you look like you're having a time of your life. I am, because it's what I literally always wanted to do. There was a very grungy little comic shop in Bristol where I grew up called Forever People, and I used to go in there and just sit there and dream about writing one of those comics and seeing my name on the front of one of them. So yeah, it is pinch me moment time in a minute, and I'm very, very grateful for what I'm doing because it's pretty much what I've always wanted to.
I do love your Skype thing right now is what was it, knee deep in some Banana Man, writing some Banana Man. I mean, that does sound pretty damn cool. Right?
Well, it's Banana Man, isn't it?
Getting up in the morning and thinking, I'm going to go and write me some Banana Man.
I know.
I know.
Which I pretty much did when I was 9. I should go and write some Banana Man now for me. Because when I was working with these kids the other day in the school I mentioned, we were talking about stuff, and obviously a lot of them write fan fiction, which obviously a big thing for a lot of people, writing fan fiction on the shows they love, and they were all coming out, all the stuff you expect. There was a lot of like Vampire Diaries fan fiction, Supernatural, and all those kind of things. And I was saying, well, it's exactly what I did, but we just didn't have the internet to post it on. We had, the best you did was photocopy it or send it into a fanzine, but most of us all started writing fan fiction, even if we didn't know that's what it was. Playing with these characters and writing the stories you want to see, or drawing pictures of Spider-Man beating up a supervillain that you'd want to make up, So I think most people who do this line of work started by doing that. And I just think it's great that actually you do get, for kids today who are starting to get into fan fiction, there are more ways to get it out there and get it out of that community.
That comes back to the point you were making earlier on about, current tech, Skype and etc. Is that you've got that outlet now. You can do that. There are so many websites that are just there for that, and it is really cool.
It is.
Yeah, and I think podcasts. I've said before, podcasts are the fanzines of today because growing up as a Doctor Who fan in the 80s, you sent off. You got your copy of Doctor Who magazine or your copy of the Doctor Appreciation Society newsletter or whatever, and there was adverts for people's fanzines they put together, and you sent off and you got you got it through. And perhaps I don't know, that actually I might not be aware of it, but it doesn't seem so prevalent now, the sort of fanzine market. But what you have is people doing podcasts, and you only have to put Doctor Who into iTunes to have the amount of Doctor Who podcasts that are out there doing exactly what fanzines did. And what we're doing now, chatting, and talking about these things and putting stuff into more depth that you would see in an official magazine or an official show, whatever. So yeah, I think podcasts are a major show of how things have changed. But actually, it's the same stuff going on. It's just doing it in a completely different medium.
Yeah, sure.
But on that, something you just said before, getting into the comic book industry and everything today, do you have any sort of tips or any sort of advice that you could throw for people? Any sort of advice that you maybe pass out to anyone who wanted to get into this?
Well, I think the thing is, as always with these things, is you haven't got to wait to be told to do something. If you want to write, just go ahead and write. An aspiring writer is just someone who should be writing. What people usually mean when they say an aspiring writer is that they want to be a published writer. In a very traditional way. The tip that you hear authors say all the time, and it's really good. There's a reason why they say it, is start writing. Don't wait for someone to give you permission to write. Just write whatever you want to write. Just write it and learn from it. But I think the biggest tip is finish something off, because then you've got something to show someone. You can go to someone with as many ideas in the world. I've got the idea for this series. I've got an idea for this book. But to actually say, I had an idea for this book or this comic or this play or whatever, and I wrote it, and here it is, there, it's brilliant, because you've shown that you've got committed to something. You finish it off to a point where you're happy to show it to someone else. It might be, might be rough around the edges. I mean, everyone when they start off, their work isn't perfect, and it isn't even perfect when they've been working in the industry for so many years. But to prove to publishers and editors and anyone working and wanting new talent that you can see something through to an end and know how to wrap it up, and I think that's the best thing, because then and when I came into comics because I'd written other things, and so that was my route in. But the same when I first wrote, the first thing I ever wrote with Mark back doing the audios, it was only because we'd worked on fan stuff and things together and proved that we could produce something, and we knew how to finish something off. And I think that's a major part of it. So start something brilliant, but then keep at it and finish it, because then you can show that you've got the legs to do this.
Yeah, that's some
good advice. Great advice. We've taken up a lot of your time. I mean, it's gone on for a bit longer than I thought it would. But, I mean,
your throat must be red raw by now.
Well, no, get someone talking who's a fan of something, talking about something. You just keep going, won't you? So
exactly. Yeah. We'd just like to give you a couple of minutes to maybe just pimp out what you're doing right now. We've talked about it already, and then we'll sort of wrap it up there. Yeah,
sure. So the two main comics, well, there's actually three main comics at the minute. There's Doctor Who, The Ninth Doctor, out from Titan. For slightly younger readers, there's Penguins of Madagascar, which is the miniseries based on the film. And then The Vikings, which launched this week, a 4-issue miniseries. So in the world of comics, that's the big thing. In the world of books, I launched my first Sherlock Holmes novel last week from Titan Books, as opposed to Titan Comics, called The Patchwork Devil, which is quite a traditional Sherlock Holmes. But if you like genre fiction, you might recognise a very monstrous figure in it as well, as Sherlock comes up against someone from the annals of horror fiction. And then the other big thing I'm working on, we haven't talked about really, is Star Wars. I co-write a series of books for kids, sort of 8+, called Star Wars Adventures in Wild Space, which is a brand new corner of the Star Wars universe, set just before Rebels, about two children who are lost and looking for their parents in the middle of the Empire, which is a very dangerous place to be for two children. So that launched a couple of months ago as well. So they're all ongoing. So lots going on at the minute.
And just so the listeners know, I wasn't being lackadaisical not talking about it. I've been biting my tongue so much not talking about Star Wars.
Star Wars, because obviously the series started a couple of months ago in the UK. We have something called World Book Day, where kids get vouchers and you can swap them for one of 10 books, and we launched it through that. Again, to show the power of Star Wars, it went to the number one. It hit the number one spot on the charts, not just the children's book charts. I mean, the UK book charts. Yeah. It was, it was phenomenal. And it's a new series to try and introduce kids into reading Star Wars, and hopefully for a lot of them reading books in the first time. That thing of, for people who perhaps don't think the books are for them but love Star Wars, hopefully they'll pick these up and read it. And I also know there's a lot of adults who are reading it as well, which is obviously great. But we've got a few of those out. We've got a few more to come. But as with all things Star Wars, we can't really talk too much about what's to come, because it's all very, very secret and hush-hush.
Can you at least, I don't know, with a wink or a nudge, allude to whether it's canon or not?
Yes. I can say categorically it's canon.
It's canon.
It's apparently, yes.
Wow.
As far as I've been told. What happens now is that a couple of years ago, there's a lot of people, listeners might know this, Lucasfilm sort of shunted the current sort of the tie-in fiction of that time into an alternate universe, into Star Wars Legends, which is still there, It still exists. You can still read it,
Yeah.
but they've sort of like pared it down to a new canon, which, especially for people who might have discovered Star Wars through The Force Awakens and through Rebels, especially through Rebels. So people could come in without that massive swathe of 30 years of fiction to have to go, oh, I've got to read all that, have I? You know, so, and I don't think it's going to be that long before they get to that point again, because I mean, the publishing output is amazing. And so, yeah, as far as, this series, Adventures in Wild Space, goes through Story Group, which is the same Story Group that works on the films again. So it shows how important people are taking this sort of tie-in fiction to be now. Brilliant. So, and there was a couple of points we wrote things. I wrote things in the first book. Tom, who writes the second book, wrote things in that, and we had to take them out because we'd accidentally copied things from future films that we had no idea about. So we put our characters in situations and they go, well, you can't do that because that might happen one day, but we can't tell you who it would happen to or why. But you just can't do that. So yes, so that was a bit of a shock. But yeah, it's great that actually you have a group of people who are actively monitoring this stuff and making sure it fits in. Definitely. And yeah, so the upcoming book, I think the next one, it's coming out in June, and it's called The Steel, and it takes place on Lothal, who people who watch Rebels know that's the planet that Rebels started on, and it's set a few years before Rebels. So there are lots of things that link it into what we've seen on screen so far.
I mean, it's one thing to be writing Star Wars, but to be writing something that's actually canon, that must be awesome.
Yeah, well, you just sit there and go, "You what now?" You know, I just repeat myself all the time. I sit here and just go, "Really? Are you really going to let me do this?" We in the first, I think it's in the first book of the series. I'm just going to check now which one it's in. I put Darth Vader in it, thinking that would never end up in the book.
Yeah.
And then I got an illustration back that had Darth Vader on it.
Wow.
Oh,
so even if he never appears again, I have written some dialogue for Darth Vader.
Oh.
So, and I put it in, to try and test the boundaries of, can I get away? And it's only on he's not there in person. He's on basically he's Skyping one of the main characters, and he's throwing his weight around, via a hologram. And I thought I needed a baddie. I needed a superior officer. At this point in the timeline, who am I going to have? Well, it's either going to be Grand Moff Tarkin or Darth Vader. Well, I tell you what, I'll go for Vader and see what they say. And they left it in. I don't know if I'll ever be able to do it again, but it will always be there. No matter what I do now, I've written a couple of lines of dialogue for Darth Vader. So again, the 9-year-old me is going, yes,
and
done.
Did you imagine as you were writing it? Did you imagine the James Earl Jones voice?
Oh, of course. I think I was holding a pint glass up to mouth and
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, this has been so cool. So everybody check out Titan Comics and Titan Books as well, and keep an eye out for the Cybermen 50th anniversary story coming out. Cavan, this has been an absolute genuine pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on.
It has.
Well, thanks for having me.
Just the fact that I even got the reply to the email, I was buzzing. But for you to actually be here and doing this, and it's amazing that you've got your own little setup, because it sounds fantastic. So, but yeah, check out Vikings. Check out the Ninth Doctor. You can get it in your comic book stores. You can get it on your digital Comixology kind of thing.
Yep.
You can get it anywhere. And again, Cavan, Chris has already said it. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.
And will we just end it there?
Yep.
Hey, brilliant.
Awesome.